Zarah, and we are towards the top of Daf Ayin He Amud Aleph, 9 lines or 8 lines from the top of the Amud, and we are starting the last inquiry in the subject of Yain Nesech, which is the last subject, basically discussing what happens when you are dealing with the wine that has been absorbed in the vessels, now that you want to deal with Yain Kasher in the same vessels. So says the Gemara, Ba'u mineh mirabbi Abahu, they asked Rabbi Abahu, Hani gurgi de aramai, mai. If you have the small strings, ropes, that was like a netting type of situation, holding the grapes together under the press, that they should not be scattered all over the place when the large korah, the large wooden log that would press on top of the anavim, on top of the grapes, will come crashing down, that would not necessarily splash and scatter all the grapes all over the place. It will be tied with small strings, small ropes, and those ropes, of course, absorb some of the grape juice that squeezes and squirts out. So if you want to use a non-kosher gurgi, now you want to use it for your wine press, how do you kosherize it? Is there a way to kosherize it? So it says, you find the gurgi on eBay secondhand, and you want to use it for yourself. How do you go about it? So says the Gemara, Amar le Rabbi Abahu. Rabbi Abahu says, Tenitua, we learned this in a Braita. Harashahayu gitav badav ubet badav temein. This is a Braita that speaks about your wine press or oil press that has been operating without mindfulness of tahara. Everything is tameh. Now it becomes before the Chag, whatever it is. You want to now change the whole process and produce wine and oil that is tahor. But you have all the vessels that have oil and residual wine that is tameh. So how do you go about being metaher your betabad, the oil press, or your gat, your wine press? So it says the Braita, bikesh lastam betahara, if you want to do it betahara, Hadafin va'adashin va'lulavin, the wooden surface, which is the daf, that would be the platform for the grapes to be crushed on. That the adashin is the gat itself, the wine press itself. Ve'halulavin, that's like it would be basically broom-like vessels to gather the scattered clusters and pieces of grape back to the pile where they have to be crushed. All of those, Madichan, you could wash them and they're good to go. You rinse them off, you make sure there's no residual oil or wine, grape juice on them, and you're good to go. No further hechsher, so to speak, is needed. But ve'akalin, which is the gurgi, those ropes, strings that you keep the grapes together with them, Shel netzari depends. Shel batzbutz menakivan, if you have them made out of wooden strings, so then they don't really absorb anything. So therefore, you just do the process of niguf that we mentioned before. You have to do it with mayim and with ether, with water, rinsing off, and then with the ether, with ashes to dry it up, perhaps some detergent effect to it as well. Maran Shulchan Aruch actually writes this, Saliyes Mandalit, Sif Dalit, he writes something that the Achronim disagree with, because there's no tur, there's no makom for it, that if you are kosherizing, in washing kelim together in the hot water, if you put the efer inside, that pogem, it destroys the taste, and therefore it will be mutar. Chacham Ovadia, based on this, writes, and there are others who agree with him, many who disagree with him, that based on that, if you want to use, let's say, a dishwasher with a soap that is pagum, that it has a very strong negative taste, that would take care of the milchik, fleishik, and so on. Many disagree with that. I was speaking to Rav Heinemann once. He says, well, I tasted the detergent, and it's not such a bad tasting thing. As I was like, I leave it up to Rav Heinemann to do actually those hands-on experiments. But nevertheless, this becomes like really the platform for maybe, just maybe, the effort. It's not just the drying effect that he has, but it also takes care of any residual taste that may or may not be there. But nevertheless, that's by nesarin v'basbus. You wash it, you rinse it, you dry it with ether, and you're good to go. V'shel shifa, v'shel gemi. But if they are made out of material that absorbs actually more the oil or the grape juice that is squirted on them, then in that case, miashnan yud bet chodesh. In that case, you have to actually age them for 12 months, and after 12 months, the taste is so pagum, or according to the Chacham Tzvi, has a tshuva. I don't remember where it is, and maybe Siman Pezayin Pechet. He writes that after his understanding is very mechudash Chacham Tzvi. He writes that after Yud Bet Chodesh there is no taste. It's not just tam pagum. It's much worse than that. It's nothing. It's absolutely nothing there. He's not talking about something of chametz that you want to use on Pesach after 12 months. Actually, Rav Moshe Feinstein and others, when they discussed the sugya of using something treif after 12 months, they bring this Chacham Tzvi, even though that it's a very big chidush. There are those who agree with it, there are those who disagree with it. They Chemed, Rab Chaim Chizkiyahu Medini of Turkish origin, and then went to Greece, and so a tremendous, perhaps the first encyclopedic work of halakha, a mind-boggling work of halakha. He has about 9 or 10 pages on this subject of the Shita of the Chacham Tzvi, whether or not after 12 months something is still left there or not. The question of Rav Moshe Feinstein that was asked was by a grandson that inherited a very fine, extremely expensive heirloom of the family of a china set, that the grandmother, unfortunately, was not Shomer Torah or Mitzvot, so it was treif, right? Who knows what they served on this? And now he has it in his assets as a Yerusha. He wanted to know, okay, can he use it? Can he bring it out for the Chag? And Rav Moshe Feinstein goes through no less than 4 different sirufim of combinations of kula to allow this fellow to use it. And one of them is Chacham Tzvi that we mentioned has one, and Yabetz, his son, has a different one of Shiv Elobali. It's talking about Pesach as well. But nevertheless, Meyashanan Yud Bet Chodesh. You wait 12 months, and then it's good to go. The wine, the oil that was absorbed inside, no longer is considered a threat halachically to your kosher tahor. This is, again, remember, this Braita is talking about Tuba Tara, the Tumadike oil or wine that was absorbed inside is not going to be a threat for the kosher wine or oil that you're going to be making betara. So says the Braita, Rabban Shimon Gamliel Omer, Manichan Migat Legat. Rabban Shimon Gamliel says, you leave it from one season to another season and you're good to go. So what does that mean? That's also 12 months. I mean, from season of squeezing oil or wine until next year's, it's also a year. So the Gemara says, wait a second, pauses the whole discussion, says, what's exactly the difference over here? So it says the Gemara, Hainu Tanakama. This is the same thing as Tanakama, 12 months. I mean, what's the difference? Ikabenayu, says the Gemara, the difference is Churpi Vafli. Some years the produce is ready. Earlier, later, it's not exactly 12 months. According to the Tanna Kama, it has to be 12 months. You wait there with your calendar counting days, 12 months, and then you're good to go. According to Rabbi Shimon, you don't have to be specific. As long as it's from the season to the next year's season, even though that it was, let's say, a very warm year, these things depend. It's like, when it comes time for Sukkot, you notice this, because if you have a year before the leap year, right? Sukkot is the latest, so to speak, right? And it will be that will be your coldest, so to speak, winter, and then afterwards is the warmest, because you just 33 days off, and now you added 29 or 30 days, so that would be the worst. So here also could be a month off here and there, and Rabban Shimon Gamliel is still fine with it, as long as it's from one season to next year's season of squeezing and wine press, you're good to go. What makes a difference over here is the famous shita of the Maram Shik and Khatam Sofer that we have discussed almost every year by Parashat Zachor, because by Zachor we learn from the Gemara that it has to be at least once a year. Midoraita, you have to remember Parashat Zachor, because En Hamet Nishtakach Min Alev Ad Yud Bet Chodesh, right? You forget after 12 months, right? 12 months is the mark, the benchmark. So therefore, every 12 months, you want to remember, Zachor Azalecha Amalek Baderech, Esetchem Mitzrayim, right? But, says the Ramshik, wait a second, how about a leap year? You have 2 Adars, and by the time you get to Adar Bet, when you do Parashat Zachor, already it's been almost 13 months from last year, so you missed the 12 months mark. So he says, well, in Kitisa, that year when you do, you should have Kavanah, everyone should have Kavanah, then you should say the last part of the parasha is Parashat Zachor there, and you should have kavanah to be Yotzei Yedei Chova. The Khatam Sofer himself is not as bothered with it. It says it goes by seasons. It's a seasonal thing. It's a little bit more than 12 months. Lo nora. It's not the end of the world. Right? So that really resembles this machloket Rabban Shimon and Chachamim over here in our Gemara. So says the Gemara, Rabbi Yossi Omer, Harotzeh Ta'aran, Miyad, if you want to take these ropes, the strings that hold the grapes together, and you want to buy it off the eBay, as we said, and you want to just use it today, right? You don't have time to wait one whole year, season to season. You don't have time. So what do? No problem. Says Rabbi Yossi, Mak'ilan berotchin. You could do hagala on them, and you're good to go. Right? You wash them in bubbling hot water of Kli Rishon, and that kosherizes them. So says the Gemara, or choltan bemezetim, or you dip them, soak them in mezetim. Mezetim means when you are in process of oil press for the zetim, for the olives, the essential water that comes initially out when you cook them is a very, very sharp taste liquid that comes out. People use it for food or trash it, whatever it is. But that's an extremely sharp tasting liquid. And if you dip this inside there, whatever taste is there is going to be gone, right? So that's 10 temant of hagala. So that clears the taste. Or, says the Gemara, Rabban Shimon Gamliel, Mishum Rabbi Yossi Omer, Manichan Tachat Sinor Shememav Mekalachin. You could put it under a stream of water that is constantly coming, and that stream of water, little by little, penetrates, washes, cleans off everything that was there, oil, wine, whatever was there, it's going to be washed away. Or in a spring of water, you just put it in the spring of water that the water constantly is flowing, an outpour of fresh water that is exchanged every second, new water streaming on top of this, and that by itself is going to be good enough as well. But how many seconds, minutes, hours, days do you have to put it inside this stream of dripping water or the flowing spring of water? Says the Gemara, the kama ona. One ona is enough. Now, the Gemara is going to discuss what ona means, but one ona is going to be sufficient. So, says the Gemara, kederach she'amru b'yayin nesech, kach amru b'tarot. Just like this is applicable to yayin nesech, it's also applicable to tarot. The Gemara says what? It's exactly hafuch. This Braita is talking about tarot. Not about Yain Nesech. We want to learn from this to Yain Nesech. But the Braita is not talking about our sugya. It's talking about Tumah v'Tahara. So the one says, yeah, correct. That's what we mean. Kapelaya, which direction? This is hafuch. This is upside down, backwards. And what I say is Taharot kaiminan. This Braita is talking about Taharot. Ela, but the right way of saying it is Kedech Shamru b'Taharot, Kach Amru b'Yain Nesech. Just like this Braita is correct, halachically speaking, about Taharot, the same is also applicable to Yain Nesech, which is really our sugya that we asked Gurgi, these strings, how do you use them from a previous usage of yayin nesech to a current usage of yayin kasher? And the answer is all these things that we mentioned by taharot are also applicable by yayin nesech. So says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, what is considered an ona? Kama ona? Amar Rabbi Chia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Chia bar Abba says in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, o yom o laila, or a full day or a full night. Right? Either from morning to night or from night to the morning. And the Gemara says, Rab Chana She'ina v'amri la Rab Chana bar She'ina, he says, in the name of Rabba bar Chana, who is a Talmid of Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the name of Rabbi Yochanan is Rabbi, Chatzi Yom ve'Chatzi Laila. Half of a day plus half of the night. You take the day, divide it to half, you take the night, divide it to half, you plus those outcomes together, and that's the amount of hours you have to wait, which is always 12 hours, right? Regardless of the season. Wait a second, what's the difference exactly over here? Amar, day, night. Mara says, Amar Shmuel bar Yitzchak lo pligi. He said that these two shitas are not arguing. There's two ways of saying the same thing. The first shita that says either day or night is talking about the equinoxes. The equinoxes when you have in Nisan and Tishrei, when the day and night are equal, 6 a.m. to 6 p.m., 6 p.m. to 6 a.m. It's always 12 hours in the equinoxes. Of course, equinoxes, you have to be in the equator. That becomes more complicated. But nevertheless, we're talking about in the first shita is 12 hours. And when he says day or night, is because we're talking about equinoxes, which the day and the night are 12-hour periods. And the other one, the second one, Rabbi Chana in the name of Rabbi Yochanan, is talking about deep in the winter, deep in the summer, when you have the days 14, 15 hours, or the nights 14 hours. And yet you could still do this by dividing the period of the day into the half, the period of the night into the half, and there you have your 12 exact hours. So basically, how much is an ona? 12 hours. You're of course familiar with this in L'chot Nida, that also you have onas muchaleveset, that the woman has to be concerned about when expecting the menstrual cycle, the period, the monthly period, when it's expected to come, ona benonit, of onat haflaga, or onat HaChodesh, but Veset HaChodesh, onah simcha leveset, they stay away from each other, and that is also from either morning to night or night to the morning. So says the Gemara, Amar Rab Yehuda, Hani Rav Kidar Mai, the Mazya Madichan, the Amra Menagivan, the Kitna Meashanan. The question over here is, you're again using the vessels of the goyim that are meant for sifting wine, right? Take a look at Rashi. Meshameret. This is the second line from the bottom. Meshameret kemin sakin shenotnim bahem shmarot lotzi et yenan. They would have like sacks that are made and very fine-tuned, and they would put the settlement of wine inside of it and just hang it up there, and the gravity does its thing and sifts through when the shmarim are kept there for long enough. Drip by drip, all the wine that's contained in the sediment drips down, and you will end up with dry sediments, which you would use later on, maybe watering it down and using it again, or you would trash it. But that's the meshamirit. Now, of course, depends if you want to use that from a goy. Depends what it is made of. If it's made from, let's say, the wooden pieces of bamboos or dekel, that does not really absorb anything inside. So then the Gemara says you can wash it off, and you can use it. The mazya madichan, you can just wash it. The amra, if it's made out of wool, those who know their materials, it does absorb, but very little. It does absorb. So if it's wool, then minagivan, you have to do the whole process of niguv, wash it off, and put the ashes, the the effer on top, and that would be your process. And the kitna, but if it's made out of linen absorbs much more than wool, and then you have to wait a whole 12-month period. Miashnan ve'ika kutri, and if you have any ksharim, any knots, ties on it, you can't just do the process of kashrut with the knot being there. You have to open the knots first before you go through the process of washing, drying, or aging. So says the Gemara, Hani dekuli vechalata de aramai, and this is now talking about the chalata. Rashi says kaveret shel shpatim. You talk about like a sifter, right? You have a sifter of goyim, and again you want to use it for kosher products. How do you deal with it? So says the Gemara, again, depends what it has been made from. Bechavli desuri madichan, if it's made with things that do not absorb anything, then you just wash it, rinse it off, clean it, make sure there's no residual residue on it, and therefore it will be good. The kitna miashanan, if you have the savta minagvan, if it's made out of gemi that also absorbs but not a whole lot, then you have to do the process of washing and drying with ashes, with effer. And the kitna, if it's made out of linen, then it of course absorbs the most amount out of the three, and therefore you have to be miyashen, waiting yud bet chodesh, 12 months, to get rid of the taste that's there, and then you could use it for kasher. Ve'it behu kitri, and again here also, if they have knots, you have to unknot it. You have to open the knots before you go through the process. Itmar, second line. It was said in the Bet Midrash, Amaretz sheoshid yado legat. If you have an Amaretz that put his hand inside the gat, where you have all the grape juice and the clusters of grape on top of it, and he touched the top of the gat, he touched the clusters of the grape that's on top. If you have done your own wine production, you know how it works. You crush them, and after a little while, after a day or two, the clusters come back up, the grapes come back up, and now beneath that is sitting a whole lot of grape juice fermenting to wine. So this guy, Amaretz, who's tameh, whatever, he touched the clusters, didn't put his hand all the way into the wine, but touched the clusters of grapes on top. So what's the halachana? Says the Gemara, V'naga be'eshkolot, Rebbe v'Rebbe Chia, this is Rebbe and Rebbe Chia were Talmid Chaver. Rebbe was, of course, the Rosh Yeshiva. Rebbe Chia was the top student, so to speak, was almost like a friend to Rebbe. So they had a machloket. Chad Amar, Eshkol, V'chol sevivotav, Temein. The cluster that he touched and all of the clusters surrounding that cluster of grapes is tameh. They call a gat kula, but the rest of the entire wine pressed gat is kasher, stahor. The other one said no. Kol a gat kula nami temeah. The entire gat is tameh. The mandamar that holds only the cluster and the surrounding clusters are tameh, not the entire gat. Says the Gemara, what's the difference from what we learned in the Mishnah in Taharot Perek Tet, that sheres shenimsha berechaim, that if you open your rechaim, your milk grind, and you open the two sides and you see there's a sheretz, there's a dead mouse over there. So what do? You have all the things that he ground up. Now under the question, so says the Gemara, the only place that's tameh is the place that he touched. But if you have juice or any liquid running through, then the juice that's running through is going to be metzaref everything together. Everything is tameh. Mashkin ma'alecha kol tameh. So over here also you have beneath it, there's all this mashkin, there's all this wine beneath it. So why? It's a Mishnah. The Mishnah says there should be problem. So says the Gemara, no. Over there, hatam lo mafsik v'lo midi. There's nothing stopping them from touching the thing. There's the water or the mashke, the juice is going around, connecting everything together. Nothing is blocking it. But over here, in the case of the clusters of grape, there are clusters separating this middle cluster from the rest of the gat. Hacha mafsiki eshkolot. And therefore, it will be only the surrounding clusters which will become tameh, but not the whole gat. Orule, you want to know what the psak halacha is? Actually, Rabbi Yirmiyah came to Bet Midrash to ask a she'ela lemaaseh, and Chachamim paskined for Rabbanan Rabbi Yirmiyah. For Rabbi Yirmiyah, they paskined for him. Amrillah lebret Rabbi Yirmiyah, or it was his son that they paskined for. Kedivrei haomer, like the one that says, the lenient shita, that eshkol vechol sevivotav temein vechol agat kula tehora, that the cluster that the amaris touched and the ones surrounding it is what becomes tameh, but the rest of the entire gat will be tahor, which really concludes the entire sugya of yain nesech that we have had for past few blots, and the fourth subject of Mesechet Avodah Zarah. Now Rebbe saw that we need to, the last daf of the Gemara, we're going to have a very sweet, applicable sugya of kosherizing the kelim that you get from goyim, but not hag'ala. Here we're talking about kedushat kelim, of tevilat kelim, taking the kelim to mikveh, is going to be our sugya that we're going to be Be'ezrat Hashem dealing with in the next 2 or 3 days. Imir Hashem. Chazak Baruch.